Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Credits and Chords. It has been a little bit since we've seen each other last. Rex and I just have a lot of things going on. Work's getting in the way. We've both been promoted recently, and then a bunch of crazy things have been going on at each of our jobs. So it's been kind of rough to get in here and do some episodes, but today we're back. We're going to do a legacy episode, as I like to call them, on Limp Bizkit. Been wanting to talk about them for a while, and originally had planned to do this episode when there was four of us cycling through the bands, just to get a reaction from the guys to see what they would say about this band, because I've always been a big fan of the band, and like Nickelback and like other bands alike from that time period, they're kind of just shit all over and hated on without any real time given to observe the actual music for itself. And I know what you're thinking. I'm not here to change your mind. If you don't like Limp Bizkit, if you don't like Fred Durst, cool, I get it. If you are a fan or you're maybe curious about them and you want to check them out for the first time, that's what my video is all about. Um, that's what we like to do here Beyond the Credits and Chords, is just explore shit, not necessarily make rash judgments. Um, and it's all about the music. We're not really talking about any of the extra shit that goes on with this band. Um, Obviously, I'm not trying to, you know, take sides of the actions of losers or scumbags if that's what they're doing. I'm just talking purely about the music and the life experiences that I've gone through with this band. So let's kick it off. Limp Bizkit's been around since 1995. They kicked off their career with their debut album in 1997, $3 Bill Y'all, pictured here on the podium, popping on the podium as usual. $3 Bill Y'all is an aggressive metal album that came out, right at the kind of the start of the new metal thing. So that's why you'll always hear Limp Bizkit grouped in there with Korn and bands alike. Slipknot. Those are all the start of something beautiful, maybe, or trashy and shitty to a lot of people as well. New metal gets a bad rap. I personally enjoy it, but I do understand why it's not liked. Limp Bizkit being one of the forefathers of this genre in general. If you had the big four of new metal, like they talk about the big four of thrash, you would probably have Korn, Limp Bizkit, Slipknot, Linkin Park, but there would be a lot of interchangeable other bands that I could see making that top four for people. But I think the constant in the top two would probably be, Korn and Limp Bizkit, and maybe even my boy Deftones, my boys in the Deftones. They were right there too in '95 with their debut album Adrenaline. So a lot of mixed opinions on the whole genre itself, but that's the gist of it. Limp Bizkit hits the scene with $3 Bill Y'all in 1997, with this album being led by a cover of George Michael's Faith. Um, that pretty much put him on the board, as you could say. The album itself, I personally really like it. It has a sound all on its own. It's very, uh, heavy and aggressive and angsty for the time period. And I don't really think that that is a bad thing, especially for the time. I grew up listening to these guys. I had $3 Bill Y'all. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And there are tracks on this album that I still go back and listen to all the time. Admittedly, though, it's one of the albums I listen to the least from the band. I just feel like they got better and more polished and more interesting as they went along. But some shout out songs on this album for me are songs like Pollution, Counterfeit, Stalemate, Indigo Flow is always kind of interesting to me. Just it has its own vibe, It like takes you back to the time period of the late '90s where you're maybe skateboarding and not that I did that shit. I think I talked about that before in previous videos, but like skateboarding and fucking hanging out with your friends, and it was just a really interesting time period to be a teenager. And Limp Bizkit helped usher a lot of us, not usher, but added on to the ushering of us getting into music or heavier music. When I say us, I just mean my age demographic, which you know who you are. I'm not going to out myself, but you know. Um, and then after $3 Bill Y'all came out, that really highlighted the talents of the band themselves. Which Fred Durst aside, we'll get to him in a minute. You got Wes Borland, which to me is one of the greatest guitar players of all time. Super underrated, super innovative. Maybe he's not underrated these days, to be honest. I'll take that back. He does seem to get quite a bit of love, which I love for him. He deserves it. Um, but he's very unique, and that goes in just his appearance and his overall approach in writing guitar riffs that are, you know, within the realms of hip hop and metal. And I think he has really figured that out. You got DJ Lethal, who is from House of Pain fame. Jump around, jump up, and get down. Yeah, he's from that group, which is pretty cool because him and Everlast as well. They both went on to have pretty successful careers in the music game. So, you know, House of Pain, if you were around for that, I was pretty young, but it was a big deal, a big album at the time. At the time, you just couldn't, go anywhere or see a movie without that song popping up. And you got John Otto. John Otto is their drummer, and he has been their drummer for the majority of the time, for the most part. He's had some issues, so he's gone in and out here and there. Um, very good drummer, very underrated drummer as well. Very classically trained in a lot of different genres, jazz and R&B and things like that you wouldn't expect. But if you look into him, he's definitely a badass. Taking us to the Matthews Bridge for 30 fucking years, John Otto. And then you got Sam Rivers, who has recently passed away. R.I.P. Sam Rivers is a huge part of Limp Bizkit's sound. It's very apparent anytime you listen to them because it's the bass. So the bass is in your face in a band like this, and that's what you want. Him mixed with Otto and Borland, they just make a sound, man, that really no one else can get. And it's really impressive because they've hooked me for years with that sound. I don't know, they just know what they're doing as a unit, and they kill it. And then you got Fred Durst on vocals. Fred Durst is hated by a lot of people. He came out years ago and said that the whole Fred Durst thing that he does is a persona, and he kind of just played a character, and he grew up being bullied and yada yada yada. I don't know what you believe. I don't know if you care. I personally like the guy as an entertainer anyway. Me always being infatuated with movies respects that he's also a director. Not that really anything he's directed has been fantastic or amazing, with the exception of The Education of Charlie Banks. I do think that is a pretty good movie. Jesse Eisenberg vehicle, Jason Ritter, I believe. Just a really solid drama flick that I think is worth checking out if you haven't seen it. And he directed The Long Shots and a movie called Fanatic with John Travolta. Piss poor film. Anyway, not without judgment, I understand why you would hate Fred Durst. I personally like him. I think he's a smart businessman. I think he's an interesting lead vocalist. I think we shame him for a lot of the same things that we accept from like hair metal bands of the 80s, just being that douchey playboy loser attitude. That was a thing in the 80s. That was the hair metal band type shit, like Motley Crue, and like everybody loved it then. He comes out doing it in the 90s with a different twist, which I think is genius, and everyone hates him for it. But whatever, love him, hate him. Fred Durst, Wes Borland, DJ Lethal, John Otto, Sam Rivers, Limp Bizkit. The introduction to them with this album is awesome. It sets the stage for what's to come. And what is to come is Significant Other, which is their biggest album to date. Nookie, I'm sure everyone knows Nookie. I did it all for the Nookie. Everyone knows that song. Put him on the map. We talked about the board before. This just slapped him right onto the fucking map worldwide. Sold 16 million copies. This is what made them kind of a TRL band. For those of you who remember TRL and know what it is, I got you. If you don't, I also got you. It was a TV show on MTV that was kind of aired and directed at preteen teenagers with the music scene, and it had music videos from popular artists, up and comers, and mainstream artists of all kinds: metal, hip hop, pop. It's where I first saw Britney Spears. It's where I first saw Korn. It's where I first saw Limp Bizkit, the Backstreet Boys, and Sync, Nelly. That was like the way they were introduced to us as kids for the most part. And every week or every day the show would air, you would call in and vote for your favorite videos, and then the next episode they might move and rank, or the next week they'd move and rank, something like that. I can't exactly remember, but it was like that. They had guest stars, shit like that. Nookie was fucking huge on TRL. I'm sure it was number one. I don't remember exactly. But I'm positive it was number one, though. Nookie was a huge hit, and then we went on to have Break Stuff, which I'm sure many of you know has become kind of an anthem in their recent resurgence, and I think they play it twice when they play it live. You had Rearranged, which was a slower track for them, but kind of showed their diversity. And then they had End Together Now with Method Man. Those are the main hits. But the whole album is a conceptual album about breakups and, very loose conceptually, but about breakups and the struggle of, not trusting the person you're with or being cheated on or all the various stages of that go through. And the whole album just has such a tight sound to it. And, obviously some of that is due to the producer, which, he's produced plenty of albums in this genre, Terry Date. He is very popular. I believe he also did the first Deftones album. I believe he's worked with System of a Down. You can't look up this genre and have his name not pop up. But anyway, hugely successful album. I bought it the day it came out. I remember waiting at warehouse, and like I said, when I tell this story, I don't have any hatred for this band. I don't have any like hidden agenda to trash them. I mean, like I said, I understand the critiques and the reason that they're not liked, but it's just not something that I consider when it comes to music. I kind of just go in, and if I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. So that being said, I've been a huge Limp Bizkit fan pretty much since this album. I mentioned having $3 Bill Y'all. I liked it. Like I said, I liked it more once this album came out, but this was what got me into the band. I think it's a classic album. If I may change the album on the podium here to represent this glorious, glorious album, Significant Other. The artwork is sick. I mean, everything about this album was perfectly of the time. It ushered in a new genre of music. At least helped, because Korn was out there and Follow the Leader was out just about the same time in 98. This was more 99. It was like right on the cusp. So Korn and Limp Bizkit are hitting the scene, just blowing up with this sound, and they ushered in the new metal era. Even though it was birthed a little bit sooner than that, these two albums, Follow the Leader, Significant Other, that's the reason we have the genre. And they blew up. A year later we had Hybrid Theory by Linkin Park. It was just an explosion. You had to be there. I really love this album, though. I mean, I love the highs and the lows, the heaviness. Again, Wes Borland's coming in, just doing some dope shit on that guitar, teaching us, how the hip hop metal thing is going to be from this point on. And Fred Durst, I think he's pretty underrated vocally. I really don't think people give him enough credit for how he sounds. I know lyrically he's kind of a jackass, and he will say a lot of jackassy things. But I also think, like I talked about before, he's kind of that party rock approach, or frat boy maybe type thing for the '90s or early 2000s. And I get it, but I think he's genuinely interesting when he's on the microphone. And that, obviously he's not here to spit bars and blow your mind and shit, but he does his thing, and he fits the group. And if you took Fred Durst out of the equation, you wouldn't have Limp Bizkit. You just would not. I don't really know why the band gets as much hate as they do, though, because, again, 16 million copies this album sold. This album, set the stage for this shit, like I'm saying, and I think it does a good job of holding that longevity over the years. And when you see that cover, Nookie, Break Stuff. Can't think of Limp Bizkit without this album. So to ride the wave after that, they hit the scene with an album a lot of people like. I'm kind of lukewarm on it. Chocolate Starfish and Hot Dog Flavored Water. Also a huge, huge fucking album for them. It can't be understated because it sold a shitload of albums, just as much as Significant Other. Not just as much, but 10 million copies worldwide, I believe. So about 6 million less, but that's still, at the time when we were counting album sales, that shit was wild. And they got it out quick because it was only about a year and a half later, again produced mostly by Terry Date. And this one had a bunch of hits on it too. My Generation, My Way, Rollin', Take a Look Around, which is such a sick version of the Mission Impossible theme. I don't like this album as much as Significant Other or a later album, Gold Cobra, but I do think it's a good album. It just, for me, the strong tracks are super strong, but the weak tracks are really weak. And I think this is one of the albums where lyrically Fred Durst does kind of get on my nerves because he's playing it up so much more on the tracks where he just goes all out with it. Like the Roland Urban Assault Vehicle, the more rap oriented version of Roland, of course. just some of the shit he says, and Boiler and It'll Be Okay. Like, granted, it's none of it's really too much worse than like Significant Other and shit like that, but it just seems more obnoxious for the sake of it, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but this is a popular album amongst fans as well. The cover famously was made by Wes Borland, who's also an artist, and you know, I think he has a unique style with that as well. So he's just kind of a unique guy. A lot of special appearances on this album, like Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots, and he was also on a track on Significant Other. And then you got DMX and Method Man's back, um, Redman as well for that Urban Assault Vehicle. It's a really good, interesting album still. Like I said, I wouldn't rank it quite as highly as Significant Other, but I still think it's a staple in their discography. Obviously, it would probably be like their third best album, in my opinion. Um, Again, nothing amazing, nothing to like recommend for the first time. If you're going to recommend one of their albums, I say either Significant Other or Gold Cobra. Obviously, I'm being repetitive here, but there's a reason I choose those two. We'll get to it towards the end of the video. But yeah, I mean, overall, still worth checking out. I think there's still a lot of shining tracks on here. Obviously, all the singles, with the exception of My Generation. Never really loved that song. Like, I won't turn it off, but I don't love it. But I do My Way, Rolling, the rock version of it, Living It Up, Get Your Groove On, Take a Look Around. I think that's a good, solid block of tracks there. And just overall, like I said, huge success for the band. And then it kind of crashes, unfortunately. It doesn't quite end up where it wants to be because of inner turmoil in the band. Wes Borland, like I said, pretty big deal to their sound. Decides to leave. Him and Fred are not jiving together anymore, which is sad because that's kind of a tale as old as time, as I like to say, with singer guitar player relationships, and it sometimes sours. And Wes, they all got famous, relatively young, and so they're getting older and they're getting more mature with each other, and they're thinking, well, maybe I don't really want to do this. Like, Wes Borland doesn't want to be in Limp Bizkit anymore because at the time I think he was kind of ashamed of what they kind of were. They were quarreling sometimes with Slipknot and Eminem, and just getting into shit with these guys, and it plays up to their persona. And then they had the Woodstock incident that they largely took the fall for. I think that helped their career in a lot of ways, and I think it hurt them in a lot of ways. But anyway, Wes Borland exits, unfortunately, for this album. Results may vary, and obviously, they're still popular. They're still basically a household name at the time, as pop culture bands like this tend to be. And the anticipation for this album was very, very high. So, it comes out a couple of years later because of the turmoil and the recording and the replacements and all that. And they replace Wes with a guy named Mike Smith, who obviously, did his thing, did the best he could, but really didn't add or improve anything for them. He didn't contribute to the sound in a way that's going to make you think, oh, this album stands out because it had a different guitar player, kind of like the way that the Red Hot Chili Peppers in One Hot Minute might be with Dave Navarro. Like, you can hear a noticeable change, but it's not, it's not what you're used to. And to me, Results May Vary sounds kind of like a docile version of Limp Bizkit. Like, they've been neutered. And it is what it is. This album has its fans and shit like that, and I like it, but I don't love it. Kind of like the last album. I just think there's aspects of it that are boring, and I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it, but I've never really loved it. I do like certain tracks, like obviously Eat You Alive. Pretty much anytime they have a single, most singles land with me personally. Um, Give Me the Mic is pretty good. Build a Bridge is all right. Let Me Down, but some people like their cover of Behind Blue Eyes, but I just personally don't enjoy it. I don't even really like the Who version of that song. So for me, this album doesn't really cut it as a Limp Bizkit fan, and they're starting to wane in popularity around this time. Unfortunately, I think a mixture of waiting too long to come up with a follow-up album. The genre had started to already kind of sour with people. Like, we're almost on the cusp of the metalcore thing getting up there. So new metal is starting to take a digger, and sadly, this album underperforming kind of left the band in a tricky situation. So this one only sold 325,000 copies in its first week, and then eventually only 1.3 million, which is really fucking low for a band like this at the time. And that's pretty much one of the things that just marks kind of the end of them, because they never hit the heights like this again. And while this one did go platinum, it just failed to keep them afloat in the same way that they were going. So in between that, Wes Borland comes back, and they reconcile, and they're talking, and they decide to do, at least plan, a two-parter called The Unquestionable Truth, Part 1 and 2. We never saw Part 2, but they got together for this EP, and once again, the anticipation was high. And it just did nothing for them. I mean, I like it. I think it's a very interesting approach to their sound, and they come at everything a little bit differently than the previous albums. It's 7 tracks, so it's shorter for them. They're typically like 16-track band. They're just always pumping out those longer albums, which I tend to not like when they're super bloated. This one's an EP, so it comes out to little to no one gives a shit. Like 2005 is when it came out, so Wes finally came back like a year after the results may vary bullshit. They kind of put their shit aside, and they make this, and it's a lot more progressive for them, a lot more political. I think Fred's trying to take more pride in his lyrics, or take himself more seriously. I mean, however you want to look at it, he's not coming at it with the same approach. Sadly, we never got to Part 2, but the propaganda, the truth, every track starts with the. It's like a loose concept kind of deal, and it is what it is. Like, it's not a masterpiece, it's not amazing, but it's something. If you're a Limp Bizkit fan, you're like, shit, 7 new tracks, fuck yeah, why not? And then they kind of disappear again. Limp Bizkit then drops off the face of the earth, basically, for a good chunk of time. I mean, a pretty fucking good chunk of time, at least in the realm of music and striking when the iron's hot and all that shit. So the hiatus is there. I think Wes leaves again. More turmoil, more disagreeing, more thinking like, maybe I don't want to do this. I think he branches off and does some like Blacklight Burns albums, his other band, Big Dumb Face, 2 other projects of Wes's. Fred Durst pretty much does nothing but maybe direct some movies, do some guest appearances in TV shows. They're pretty much done, as far as people are concerned. Hiatus, I guess you could call it. And then, in 2011, they drop a new album. And not only do they drop a new album, Wes is back. And they dropped their second best album in their career, in my opinion, personally. It's called Gold Cobra. Weird name. They're no stranger to weird name with the chocolate starfish shit, but Gold Cobra comes in fucking hot. It expands on basically everything on Significant Other and Chocolate Starfish. Kind of combines those two things. Maybe is a little familiar in some ways, but overall just encapsulates that Limp Bizkit sound. And they kill it. I mean, this album crushes. It's a fairly long album if you have the deluxe version, 16 tracks. I'd really only take away 2 of these songs if we were going to go with that. I think the original release is 13, but overall, man, just a solid fucking album. Bring It Back is the first track on the album. Just comes in fucking hot. Gold Cobra was the lead single on the album, obviously. Shark Attack, Get a Life, Shotgun, Douchebag, Why Try. Those are all just fucking bangers. And one of the best songs on the album is only on the deluxe version. It's called Back Porch. It highlights what we were talking about with Sam Rivers just being a huge part of their sound, along with Rearranged, even Nookie, just the tone he gets for the band and the hip hop sound mixed with what Fred does. It just really works. And this album, man, I wouldn't give it a 10 out of 10 because it's Limp Bizkit, and I don't think really any of their material is that good. Even as big a fan of I am, I'd say like 8 out of 10 type shit. I don't think anything they do is a 10 out of 10, but this is as close as it gets besides Significant Other. I think they're both probably 8 out of 10 albums for me. and it kicks ass, dude. It's just a great fucking album. And then, not to glaze over it so quickly, it wasn't really that well received. It only sold 63,000 copies. I mean, granted, it came out in 2011. We're well into the streaming era here at this point, but it is what it is. They disappear again for about 10 years. I don't think Wes leaves or anything. I think there's just a number of attempts to get an album called Stampede of the Disco Elephants off the ground to no avail. I know that Fred lost a lot of those recordings in a flood or a tsunami or some shit that happened in Florida to his house. I can't remember. I read it at the time, but there's that, and then there's their whole Cash Money Records debacle where they're, on the same label as Lil Wayne, and they're trying to come out with all these songs, and I mean it's the same shit as the Disco Elephants shit. And again, stupid ass name. I think that would have been Fred leaning even more into ridiculousness of the band and shit, which they don't stray away from when they finally release 2021's Still Sucks. But I kind of like that humor. They're aware that they're kind of a hated band, and it's been a thing since their very first album. They know people probably don't love them, but a lot of people love them. They sold shitloads of albums. But Still Sucks. I don't have a copy of it because they pressed almost nothing, so couldn't really get my hands on it. I enjoy the album overall, but it is too short for how long we waited for it. It's a 10-year gap. And a lot of the songs are just super short. I mean, there's no bloated talk on this album. When I say super short, I mean there's 4 tracks in a row that are only about 2 minutes long. Maybe, and that's pretty crazy because it's only a 12-track album. All that said, though, overall, I like the whole album. I mean, it's up there with their better work. Out of Style comes in pretty hot, pretty, oh shit, Limp Bizkit's back type shit. It's pretty good. Dirty Rotten Biscuit, Dad Vibes was the lead single. Don't Change is an NXS cover, which I fucking love his version of this. I say his because it's just primarily Fred, but he kills it there. I don't know what the obsession is with having a cover album on every album after Chocolate Starfish, because, Take a Look Around is not a cover, but it's the Mission Impossible theme. So every time after that, we're in cover territory for some reason. Even on the greatest hits, there's like 3 or 4 of them. Anyway, though, Don't Change is great. I love the fucking way they do it. You Bring Out the Worst to Me, Love the Hay, Barnacle, Empty Hole, Pill Popper. These are all pretty substandard Limp Bizkit songs. Nothing crazy amazing, but again, I was happy to hear it after that 10-year wait. If you're a real hardcore fan, though, you probably heard the 4 tracks that were supposed to be on Stampede of the Disco Elephants. Songs like Lights and Ready to Go, and then their cover of Thieves by Ministry, and then finally Endless Slaughter. Those really never got a full release. I don't know why they just didn't tack them on here. Maybe just because, they were recorded 7 or 8 years before this, and they just didn't want to rehash it. But I would have just fucking done a deluxe and put that shit on there. But either way, that's that for their career in terms of their albums. Obviously, they came out with greatest hits and new old songs, which was a compilation of remixes of mostly stuff from Significant Other and Chocolate Starfish. I don't know. I always have a hard time remembering that name because it's so fucking stupid. But that's Limp Bizkit, and I wanted to talk about them as a legacy act because I think they get a lot of hate. And recently, they've had their resurgence where they're kind of back, and new metal's having a little bit of a love resurgence, mainly just for nostalgia. People my fucking age, holding on to their youth and wanting to revisit those days, and I don't blame them. I into that shit too. And the bottom line here is you either love or you hate Limp Bizkit. I understand arguments for both, but I do think as a band, you take Fred Durst out of the equation, which to me you can't do. But if you were to do that and just listen to them musically, you can't deny that they're a very tight unit of musicians. They're really kind of experts at what they do. They only get better with time, which is why Still Sucks for me was so disappointing because I feel like they could do better. And they've proved that they can with Gold Cobra. And I just hope they have one more album in them. And I know they got some tours coming up, and I guess the show was just canceled because of some Russian bullshit that Fred Durst was talking about back in 2014. I don't know. I don't know what the fuck's going on, but hopefully they got one more album left in them. That one good send off because I don't see them lasting too much longer with the loss of Sam Rivers. R.I.P. But maybe they'll replace him. Maybe they'll keep going. But yeah, Limp Bizkit. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Are they lukewarm for you? Are they kind of whatever? I don't know. I'm a big fan. We'll probably revisit this for Rex when he's around. Him and I always have good conversations about shit like this, and I think we've talked. I don't think he hates them by any means, but I kind of always compare them to Nickelback, like I did in the beginning of the episode. Nickelback, or there's two of those bands that everyone just shits. Oh, Creed, Nickelback, Creed, Limp Bizkit. I feel like that's all part of the hive mind hatred shit. But if you authentically don't like them, like I said, I totally get it. But this has been Limp Bizkit. Check them out if you haven't listened to them. They're interesting, and nobody really sounds like them still, even after 30 years. There's really no imitators of their sound. I mean, yeah, you can argue rap rock or rap metal, whatever. The closest you're going to get to shit like this is probably Rage Against the Machine. And they're their own thing. They don't sound anything alike, but they're, in terms of the energy, the aggressiveness, and the overall blend of hip hop and metal, I think they're probably the two closest contenders. Even bands like Linkin Park, I don't think quite get there, even though they kind of brandish their own style of it a little bit, and that's just the way the genre is. So once again, I'm your host, Practical. Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Credits and Chords. This has been Limp Bizkit Legacy episode. I'll catch you next week. I got a couple more of these ones in store for you. We're going to talk Green Day. We're going to talk Offspring. Probably going to talk that new movie Weapons. Just some things that I'm going to roll with solo while we wait for Rex to come back. And as soon as he's back, we got a bunch of shit up our sleeves. Got a new Devil Wears Prada album to talk about. I could go on. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to overload you, but I will see you next week. Have a good week.